In this video, we're going to learn once and for all what static files are. So in Django, static files are anything that is CSS, JavaScript, images, and even things like fonts. These are files that don't change very often, if at all. So these are, by definition, static means lacking in movement, action, or change, especially in a way viewed as undesirable or uninteresting. So they just don't change. These are files like CSS, JavaScript, and images. So when you hear static files, just think CSS, JavaScript, images, and these files don't really change very much. That's why we call them static. So Django provides this static files app. This app is how you actually implement static files within your Django project. And you would check your settings to see if it's installed. It's usually installed with a new project implementation or creating your new project in the settings under installed apps. It's called django.contrib.staticfiles. If that's there, you have the static files app. Now, I want to talk about what these static URL actually means, what load static means. We'll get to that. Then there's a static files dirs. We also have static root. So let's talk about what those are. I'm going to just pull up this Photoshop mock-up that I made. So imagine you have a Django project. Imagine you have one app called a puppies app, and inside that puppies app you have a static directory that you purposely created by yourself. Then imagine at the project level you have a static folder. So these static directories hold things like your CSS, JavaScript, and images. Usually you'll want to namespace them. So instead of just saying static and then CSS and JavaScript, you're going to say static and then the name of the app, or you're going to say static and then give it some project level specific namespacing so you can identify it. And so within that namespaced directory, you're going to put your folders, CSS, images, and JavaScript. This helps you keep organized, and this will make a lot more sense when we run Python manage.py collect static. So let's talk about what these things do. Static files dirs. That's a Django setting. Let me pull that up for you real quick. Right here, see how it's talking about static files dirs? What that does is it basically says, hey, Django, tell me where static files are that are not currently inside of an app. That's all it is. It's just a way to say, hey Django, guess what? This is where my other static directories exist. That's it. Then, when we run python manage.py collect static, that command, it knows to look inside of apps. Inside each app, you could have 5 different apps, and each app could have a static directory of its own. And all those static directories will be namespaced with the name of the app, right? Well, what python manage.py collect static does is it says, okay, I already know to go look inside of those apps and look for that static directory. Whatever's in there, I'm going to just basically pull it all out, and I'm going to put it into one directory. One folder, one directory, that's it. Just put it into this one container. And then it says, but wait, are there any other static directories I need to know about? That's where static files dirs raises its hand and says, yeah, there's some right here and maybe right here. Check that out. So then it goes, okay, thanks, goes and gets those static directories, also pulls them into this same single container or directory in this case. And that directory that stores all of those static directories is called the static root. This is the root that contains all of your static files. What static URL is it's just a prefix. So we have this directory of all of our static files. We could call this, when referring to it, we could put a prefix, a URL prefix. Think of this as kind of like a slug in a way. You're just saying, okay, whenever I'm going to get a static file, I want it to be like static slash and then whatever the other paths are. But you could also name it something like assets slash whatever, like assets slash puppies slash CSS slash, base.css. It could be like that. So that's all that static URL is. It's just a URL prefix to your static root. Okay, I've just explained that. Hopefully it made sense, but if it didn't, we're going to look and see how we can really understand this. Okay. So back in the documentation, we're going to push this over to the side. We're going to do an example as we go through this. So if you've checked to see if the installed app is there, it is. And if you've checked to see at the bottom if static URL is in your settings file, it usually is in newer installs of Django, then you don't have to really do anything at this point so far. Now it's talking about using this template tag called load static with these braces and percent signs. We'll do an example to really understand that here. And then we want to understand what STATICFILES DIRs is. Remember, that's just telling Django where other static directories might exist. So let's actually do an example. I want to create that puppies app. So what I'm going to do, we'll do that first. We'll say CLS for clear screen, Django-admin start app puppies. So now we have our puppies app here. And here's what you really want to do. You want to say, you know what? I'm going to create a static directory here. Call it static. Great. And inside this static directory, just to kind of like help us along quickly so you're not watching me copy and paste, I'm going to paste a couple of things in here. This will help us get started really quick. So I said static, and inside static I would create 3 directories for CSS, JavaScript, and images. And inside of these directories I would create a CSS file, like new, and you go over to style sheet, and then you create it. Let's close this. This is it. It's a class red_bg, and it changes the background color to red. That's all. Very simple. Here for the image, we have an image of a dog. Great. And then we have JavaScript. What this does is it's just a function called speakPuppy, and then it just fires an alert that says woof. Okay, so the point here is not to be like, why does the function do that? No, it's just to understand that we have some CSS, some images, and some JavaScript. So now, with this, we also want to create a new templates directory. And then inside that templates directory, we would want to do new directory. We want to namespace this to puppies. And inside here, this is where we put our actual HTML files. Let's call this one, let me see here. I'm going to call this dog.html. Okay. Now for this dog.html, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load static. So that is how you load the ability to use static template tags inside of your HTML. So right here, it's talking about the static template tag to build the URLs. Check this out. We take that, and then I'm going to copy and paste. And a lot of this is copy paste because I don't want you to just sit here and watch me type. You're just trying to understand the concepts, the overall, right? And then we paste this HTML in. It's looking for a style sheet here. And this is a div with the class of red_bg. So that's where this CSS comes in. I want to change the background of this div to red. Now I have an H1 that says puppies, and then I'm just going to put that puppy image here. And also notice I have an onClick event that says speakPuppy, and that's going to fire that alert. Okay, but we notice here it's like, Uh-oh, unresolved template reference. Why would that be? Well, that's a great question. Let's take a look at our settings file again. We have this puppies app, but we haven't actually added it. Like Django doesn't know that this app exists yet, right? So what we can do is we can say, let's make sure we have this puppies. Well, I'll just do this. I'll say puppies dot apps dot puppies config. Now watch when we go back to dog.html. Oh, it still says this is not, like, what's going on? So what we need to do is look at our puppies static directory. So it says puppies static, and actually we did not namespace it. So I'm going to create a new directory called puppies again. And inside that puppies, I'm going to drag and drop these there. Let's close this, close this, close this. And notice how they all went away. So the way you really figure out what this, because if you're a beginner, this part is confusing. So here's how here's the algorithm to figure out what you put here. You find your static directory in your app. Okay, found my static directory. Now every single directory after that, whatever you're trying to put in here, like we want to put a CSS file here. So we look at static, and then it's puppies, CSS, and then the name of the file. If we want to reference the image here, it's puppies img dog.jpg. So that's how it should look. Just always look at the static directory, and then whatever the path is below the static directory, that's what you put here. All right, now we don't have any of those references, like I don't know where to find this stuff. So now we're good. We have an app with a static directory. Cool. Now what? Well, let's actually create a static directory here. We'll call it static. So this is at the project level now. This isn't specific to any app, right? Inside of this, I'm going to actually namespace it. I'm just going to call it main. And I just like to think about that like this is the main project static files. And then again, we go into directories that could be CSS, could be JavaScript, new directory, JavaScript, could be a new directory, img for image. And inside of this CSS, we're going to actually create a new style sheet. This we'll just call it base.css. And inside base.css, we are going to add, let's just do like H1, and we'll just change the color to aqua, and then font style italic. Okay, that's all. And how do we actually use this now? Well, let's look at our templates. Let's look at about. Let's change the about. We have this body here. And we're going to first, again, what we need to do is load static. So we go to the top, %load static. Now you see these options here, static or static files. You don't need static files anymore unless you're on an older Django version. I have a video for that. I'll probably link to it actually. Probably look for it somewhere up here or here. Okay? So now we've enabled the ability to use static template tags within this HTML document. Then what we want to do is put the HTML here. So I'm just going to put this, and again, I'm just referencing that style sheet that is in static main CSS base.css. But wait a minute. Now this is giving me an unresolved reference. Can you figure out why? Well, the answer is because this static directory is not in any particular app. So what did we say about static files dirs? We said that that'll point to anything that's not currently in an app, but we need to include it in our project. So we go down here, we copy that static files dirs part, and then we paste it underneath this static URL. Now this is just showing you can hard code it. We don't need that. So now look where it's looking, os.path.join. So this right here, the base directory, and then it's /static. So it's looking for it here. So that is where we want to find this static directory that belongs to the project. Now let's go back to base or about.html. That reference unknown went away, and that should work. So the last thing I want to do is talk about static root. If we come to our settings file, static root, this will say, I want to store all of my static files inside of this directory. But if we go and look at my C drive on my computer, this directory doesn't actually exist. And that's why we see it highlighted here. It says unresolved reference, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it doesn't exist, but we're going to see if it will create that folder or not. So there we go. And what else is there? We need to actually create a view within our Puppies app. This is something I kind of overlooked. For the views, we're going to come here, and I'm just going to do a very simple view. We'll call it a puppy page. Just renders the request, and then it'll render puppies/dog.html. It's looking for this template within this puppies/dog.html. Okay, so now we have the view, and then we need a URLs. So let's create a urls.py so we can actually see this page. So we say new Python file, urls.py. And for this, we need to just add this here. So this just has path. We are importing that puppy page view, and we're just saying the path is this. And now we need to include a reference to this actual URLs configuration from our main URLs file here. So what you do is you say this path, and then this will be like puppies, puppies/that. And then for this, we want to say include puppies.urls. There we go, just like that. So that knows to look for the URLs that are in the Puppies app. Okay, done. And that should be it. If I did everything correctly, we should be able to check this out. Let's go ahead and close all of these. Now, I want to do the first test. Python manage.py collect static. This is the command, like I said, that will go and look inside of our apps right here for this static directory. It will also look for any other directories that we've told it here in STATICFILES DIRs. And the idea is it's going to take all those directories, put them under one roof, and it's going to stick them in this area here. Okay, you ready? Moment of truth. We hit enter. This is 123 static files copied to this area. Let's check out that area now. So it does exist. Here it is. This is the admin. So we're kind of modeling ourselves after the professional Django developers. They structure their things the exact same way. These are static files from the admin app that's included with Django. You know, if you look at the settings here, django.contrib.admin. Then we have our main. It didn't include the empty directories, so we have base.css. Let's see if we can open this up. We're going to just open it with Notepad here. Yep, that's exactly what we would expect. And then let's look at puppies. We have CSS. So what it did was it just transferred everything, all of our static files, into this one single directory. Now here's where the important point comes in. Notice the name spacing. We have puppies. CSS. And then we have main CSS. If we would have not namespaced these, we have two CSS folders here, right? That's base.css. This is also base.css. There could be files overridden because of the same name, because it's basically putting everything in one directory. It's not going to create two files with the same name. So that's why you really want to namespace it. Hopefully that lesson is very clear from this. Now, all that's left to do is so here's the thing. In static files, when you read this documentation here, it says, if you use the static files app, then run server, when you do this actual run server and debug is true, it will serve, Django will automatically serve your static files. But what if you wanted to serve your static files not from your actual directories here, but from the actual location that your static root is in, just to make sure it's working? Well, we'll talk about that right now, because that was a question that really perplexed me. And if that goes over your head, you don't have to watch it. But here we go. We're going to do Python manage.py run server. So all is well. We open this up. Now we first want to look at that about page. About. Okay, it's Aqua. So our static files are coming through. We could right click this, say inspect. Look at this networks tab. And then we refresh the page here. We see this base.css coming through. Cool. Now let's look at the puppies directory. Okay, we have a red background. That's a class, remember, red_bg. We have this image, obviously, and then we have, let's see if we click it, it says wolf. So we've implemented images, CSS, and JavaScript on the puppies page. So all that works, but let's take a look and see. So this is the main area. Let's inspect this here. This image. Does this image actually exist here? Yes, it does. So this is looking at my, well, basically that. So what happens if I comment out the static files app, right? What happens if I do that? Will this page work? Let's turn on no cache. Okay. It doesn't work anymore. Why would that be? Oh, this is what puppies page looks like now because I don't have the static files app going. But what if I still wanted to serve static files without using the static files app? Check this out. And you'll probably see this like all the time. There's this static method here. So you go into your URL patterns of your main project. And this is what you do. You add from django.conf import settings, from django.conf.urls.static import static. And what I want to do here is I basically want to do this. So if settings.debug, because we're importing settings, so if true, because when you're running development, debug is set to true. So if true, we're going to actually fire this URL patterns, and this will be a list, and it's a list of, well, we will find out because I'm printing that. So now let's click down here. Let's take a look and see what it prints out. This is a URL pattern object. See, this is what it looks like. It's in a list, and it's of the class django.urls.resolvers.url pattern. So all this is doing is adding a URL pattern to our URL patterns, which is pretty much what we would expect, but it seems kind of like really mysterious. And what it's looking for is it's looking for the static URL, which is this here, so /static. And then it's looking for the document root. Remember what the document root is? It's this directory where we just sent all of our static files to. So instead of having our site break like it is currently, because we added this URL patterns, this static method, now we can see it again, everything works. And it's actually referencing the actual static root. That's the big takeaway. It's not referencing these static directories here. Watch, I'll prove it. If I comment that out and I refresh, it's not working anymore, is it? When I include it, it does work. So that's what this setting does. It's kind of odd that you have to, I mean, I don't know if you have to comment out the app, but if I put this here and I keep static here to try and define it and get the files from the static root, they don't actually, I don't believe they're actually coming from the static root. But honestly, I'm not sure how you would even know. Actually, I do know how to tell if this is actually working, if it's referencing the static root or not. So what I could do is if I delete this static directory, and if I delete the static directory inside of my puppies app, then if this is actually referencing the static root, then my site will still work. Let's go back, and now it's not, see? It's not working. If I go to About, it's not working. So that means it's referencing the project and apps, static directory. If I hit undo, so Control Z, and I wait for this to refresh, it is working again. So whenever you add this, but you don't comment out this, for some reason, this enabled will reference the actual static directories within your project and your apps. It will not reference your static root wherever you put those files. When you uncomment this, or when you comment this out, and you have this in your urls.py, and we refresh, it does work. So that's just a little tidbit about that. That is static files. Hopefully this helps you understand what static files are, because I know that I'm probably going to reference this video. And if you're wondering, I don't know if I covered this, but if you're wondering why you should separate your static files from your Django project, I'll leave a link in the description below. The main idea is you don't want to bog down your server that's serving your Django project with loading static files, because it's going to be very slow. There's also other benefits like security. You're going to get speed, you're going to get efficiency. You're also going to get flexibility to change some things later. Although on the opposite side of the coin, some people think that, you're optimizing too early and it's premature optimization to be thinking about needing to optimize your site before you have any traffic. So that's all I will say. I'm not trying to build a deep discussion here. And there's also different ways to actually deploy your project. And you can find that right here, deploying static files. Like you see here, you can serve your site from static files from the same server, from a dedicated server, or from a CDN like Amazon services. So there's a deeper discussion here for deployment. That covers it for static files. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe, and hopefully you have a deep understanding of what static files are.